So about 2 more minutes and we'll start.
Be sure to give us the page number, George, from where you're reading.
It starts, I think, on 380,
Great.
but it's not straight through.
Okay. Close enough.
Page 3,
It's 380.
380.
I think that's where it is.
I'll find it. Ooh. Three. $68,
This is what Robert,
400.
subordinated caste, but resists the box others force it. That's what he did.
Okay.
Here's this.
So who have we got here?
Do you think he's?
Tina?
There's 20.
Alrighty. Tony here, Pat here?
Audience here.
I'm here, Pat.
Well, I think we can get started. What I had suggested earlier is that we have a couple of questions that are posted up in the chat. I'd like to have everybody respond to those. You know, we got 20 people, so don't go on, but we'd like to hear from everybody. And nobody should talk twice before everybody's had a chance to talk once. And I'd ask Tina to maybe go down the list and call on people, if that makes sense to folks. We sent out an email. It put those questions in there, which we'll read before we start. And also to draw out of the book any suggestions you saw that Wilkerson had for what we might do. And I thought I would start, and it starts on 380, but I've pulled some stuff out. And I'm going to read a few paragraphs from her about what she thinks, if that's okay to start with. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. Once awakened, we then have a choice. We can be born to the dominant caste, but choose not to dominate. We can be born to the subordinate caste, but resist the box others force us in. And all of us can sharpen our powers of discernment to see past the external and to value the character of the person rather than demean those who are already marginalized or worship those who are put up on pedestals. We need not bristle when those who are deemed subordinate break free. We should rejoice that maybe one more human being can add their true strength to humanity. The goal of this work has not been to resolve all the problems of a millennia-old phenomenon, but to cast a light onto the history, its consequences, and its persistence in our everyday lives right now, and to expose and to express hopes for its resolution. A housing inspector does not make the repairs on the building. he examines it, and then each of us has to make the repairs to the house we live in. The fact that the bottom caste, though it bears much of the burden of the hierarchy, did not create the caste system, and the bottom caste alone cannot fix it. The challenge has long been that many in the dominant caste who are in a better position to fix caste inequity have been the least likely to want to. Caste is a disease, and none of us is immune. Our era calls for public accounting of what caste has cost us all. A Truth and Reconciliation Commission, so that every American can know the full history of our country, wrenching though it may be, the persistence of caste and race history, and the defensiveness about anti-Black sentiment in particular, make this literally unspeakable to many in the dominant caste. You cannot solve anything that you do not admit exists, which could be why so many people might not want to talk about this. We must make every effort to ensure that the past injustice, violence, and economic discrimination will be made known to the people. Einstein said in an address to the United Nations that the taboo of let's not talk about it must be broken. It must be pointed out time and again that the exclusion of a large part of the colored population from active civil rights in the common practices is a slap in the face to the Constitution of the nation. When an accident of birth aligns with the most valued in a given caste system, whether being able-bodied, male, white, or other traits, which we had to say it gives that lottery winner a moral duty to develop empathy for those that must endure the indignity. And it calls for a radical empathy. And she goes on to talk about what that might be. And so,
You've lost me. Where are we?
well, I'm not reading directly. I've
Oh.
taken some things out of
Okay,
and I'm going to stop there for the moment. And just to say that if we want truth and reconciliation, before reconciliation has to come truth. And before truth has to come education. And this book has been an effort for those of us who have read it to try to educate ourselves about what the truth is. And we're going to go into answering these two questions. For Lois, the question is, and maybe you could read that, Tina.
Okay. It's in the chat, so if you guys need to follow along, just look at the chat. It says, what have you learned from reading Caste? How has it affected you personally? Has it had an impact on the way you live your life? And what are you going to do personally? And what can you do collectively?
And then Greg's question follows up.
What is the incentive for people to change? What is your incentive to change, especially for those of us who benefit from our privileged position in the caste system?
And I can start, and then we'll go through other folks, and I'll try to do it briefly. You know, what I've learned is more about the inequities of our society. And it has motivated me in a couple of kinds of ways. One is that we do work in the schools, and I think it's important for the schools to teach the truth about our history, and I don't think they do. And so I'm going to redouble my efforts. And to change curriculum in the schools is very difficult because the state sets standards, and we just tell a whitewashed history of this country. And we need to tell the truth about it. Otherwise, people are going to have no incentive to change, no understanding. And the other thing that I'm going to do is do some research on what are the local sins of caste that we have done in this town. And, you know, it goes way back to being a sundowner town where there were signs painted that said African Americans have to leave town by sundown, and they didn't use those terms, but that was the import of the message. But there are things every year that have happened that have been done by the leaders in this town that have caused pain and have denied people the ability to, people of color, the ability to own homes and to build their own wealth and to be accepted in this town. And so those are two things I'm going to work on. And then Greg's question, which I think is really important, is, you know, what's my incentive to change? Well, I've been an activist all my life. I've been an anti-capitalist. I think that our economic system is part and parcel of a racist system. And so I'm going to continue that fight. But the more important question is what incentive do other folks in the dominant caste have to make a change? And I think that first, people have to know and accept the fact that things were done, you know, that the sins of slavery and of Reconstruction and on, and to spell those things out specifically so that people can understand what their privilege is. So that's my answer to the questions. And if other folks, you know, talk about what you learned from the book, what you might want to do, and if there's action we could take collectively, put that out there too. So I'm going to shut up, and each person should take a couple of minutes and say what they want.
Okay, so I'm just gonna start at the top of the list. We have Connie.
Me?
Yep.
Okay. One of the questions was, how has this changed you personally? It has made me want to read more on this subject. I called my nephew in Hawaii and was surprised to find out that he and his wife are reading Caste. I don't know if they have a group or not. I didn't go into that. And he was surprised that I was reading it. So, I mean, why should we be surprised reading this? We should read more of that kind of book. I'm also reading one in 1968, which is old, but it's by Carl Lutze, who lived this stuff, marched with the people, with the Black people, was the only white pastor in a Black church. And he took his church, not the Black church, but he took the white church to task because they were doing nothing about the things. So there are two sides to it. His side does not deny one bit of the depression of the Negro people, but it also brings out some solutions, some people that are working on solutions, or at least were at that time. And it's good to read that, to know that there are people who are in line with what we are thinking and doing something about it. As for doing something about it, I'm 100. I don't drive anymore. I still think, thanks to God, and I still learn, and I intend to do more learning on this subject. And George, if you can find something that this old lady can do, I'll be glad to do it.
All right. Thank
All
you.
right, Berto?
Well, I was so glad that George picked out the passage on 380 because I had noted something when I read it. And it's the part that says, we can be born to a subordinated caste, but resist the box others force upon us. And the note I made for myself in the margin was that's exactly what Robert Cotton did. He got out of the box that Valparaiso expected him to be in as a Black male growing up in Valparaiso and sustaining all the suffering he did, including the murder of his stepbrother. So I thought that was very good. On a very personal level, I have a brother who never fails, no matter how short our conversation, to make some sort of offensive remark about minorities, even South Asians. And he knows that my son is married to a Chinese woman, and I have mixed race grandsons, but he always manages. I'm going to try to find out a way, try to figure out a way to answer him or comment to him. As far as public things are concerned, I just haven't gone that far yet. I know, I've worked with the Valparaiso Builders Association when Barbara Cotton and her family and the Ballards and Gladys Allen all came to Valparaiso, but that was so many years ago. I haven't done anything in between except send my money to the Southern Poverty Law Center and to ACLU. Thank you. This has been very, very good. I'm so anxious to hear what others have to say.
Thanks.
Diane?
Oh, me? Oh, well, I'm sorry I missed the other discussions. We had family things that came up. I think what made me aware is just the importance of empathy and with people like family members, is to try to get them to see things from another point of view. And I mean, they're going to have to realize in 2050, the white people are going to be in the minority. So they're going to have to decide if they want to live a happy life, they're going to have to be able to be open to people that are different than they are and have, different ideas. And instead of feeling threatened, they should try to see these people who are different as giving them something in return. Teaching them to be a more open human being and I guess trying to not be the dominant caste anymore.
Okay. Adam?
These are big questions. I suppose I'll go now. I'm tempted to postpone, but nobody's maybe tackled Greg's question. For me, the incentive may have to be internal. I don't know, it's flowery language maybe, but a desire for justice for all people. There can be self-interest, maybe an acknowledgement that if we deny fair treatment, if we deny justice to one group, that any other group could be next, or that our society can only be its best if everybody's involved, if everybody can participate on an equal basis. But for me, it's grounded also in my faith that a command to love your neighbor as yourself feels to me like incentive, a feeling of common humanity that can cross boundaries. What to do personally? I'll certainly continue any racist work I've been involved with the Valpo schools, with several groups at my church, partnering with other churches in the region it's on my mind that my life is fairly segregated. You know, some of that's an accident of living close to my employer. It's not that accidental though, right? The towns we live in are not purely accidental. But it's on my mind that my daily passions are sculpted by where I live. That there are things in communities in our region that I wouldn't tolerate if my kids were in the same situation that some other kids not that far away are. So I haven't found a group say that is activated around providing supplementary education in Gary schools or this sort of thing. But it's on my mind that if schools in Valpo have problems, schools in Gary have them in spades.
Okay, Anne Marie?
Hi, sorry I was late. So personally, I guess I have two missions. One is talking when, where the opportunities present themselves or where I can create them to white friends to make them aware. Because I feel like a lot of people just aren't aware of the inequities and that Black people live with a different set of fears and concerns than we live. I thought I was pretty aware. My mother was a civil rights activist, and I just have lived in Africa. I did have a history of I felt awareness, but then when the protests hit and someone in my circle sent me the Invisible Knapsack by Peggy McIntosh, that just blew me away because I had no idea the details she lays out about life that African American people of color deal with on a daily basis. So I try to make, I send that to anybody who who listen. And I happen to be, I think I mentioned last time, on the board of the Valparaiso International Center, and we've been doing multicultural events, and we sponsored an essay contest for middle schoolers and high schoolers on the book Stamped and Racism, Anti-Racism in You by Ibram Kendi, who also wrote an adult version of that book. And we had a forum last Saturday, community forum. The kids read their essays and there was discussion, and those kids are hungry for this conversation. And one of the girls said if every person in her high school read this book, it would change their views on things. And you think of kids that age being shy and not wanting to talk. These kids wanted to talk. So that I feel very fortunate because there's something very concrete that I can do, because we're going to move forward and do another contest. And I'm really interested to talk to any people here who have worked with the middle schoolers in Valparaiso, because I understand your group has had an effort in that direction. And I would love to hear what has gone on with that and how that may have supported what we did without us knowing it. So that's and I'm also participating in another conversation that's out of a group in Chicago. The website is transformrace.com. They're having a conversation tomorrow evening from 6 to 8. And I guess my personal life, I've made it a point to cultivate friendships with Black people where I can, and where there's a feeling of connection, not just because they're Black, but there's a feeling of connection. And so that's something, and that gives me a lot of insight, because I can talk about issues with my friends as well, who happen to be Black. So thank you.
Tony?
If I could say, I'll send out that article by Peggy McClintock to everybody, and I'll connect you with the schools group.
Thank you so much. I emailed Jennifer Hurley and a few other Michelle Harris and and one other person, Jal. I can't remember her first name. So I did email them over the weekend. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, Tony?
I'll just say that I had a tremendously enjoyable time reading this book. One of the things that I take away is learning more about Indian and the caste system in India. I never knew who Ambakar, and hopefully, Sue, I'm saying that right, but I never knew who Ambakar was. I knew who Gandhi was. I knew a little bit about that history, but learned something in reading that today or through the last month. For me, when I came to Valparaiso as an 18-year-old freshman from the city of Chicago, I sought to align myself with people who had a like-mindedness, people who wanted to push an agenda of inclusion while still maintaining our collective soul. I went into the background a little bit because I was tired. My hope is not to get tired again, to continue to align myself with people who have that spirit of inclusion while maintaining our collective soul. My hope is I just want to live. I want to be able to go to the grocery store and wear my sweats and stocking cap and not be looked at differently than when I leave work and I have on my khakis. That's why I'm here. That's why I do the work. That's why I've aligned myself with good people that are around the screen. And I hope to continue to do that in the future.
Okay, Connie Whitmer. Connie, you're muted.
Okay, all right. What Connie said about wanting to learn more, I've actually picked up a few more books, and I want to read more just for my own personal knowledge. I just purchased The White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, where she said it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. And my background, I grew up in Southwest Missouri, and never really encountered anything about diversity at all. It was just a very white community. And ever since I left home, I've lived in areas. I lived in Oklahoma City, Kansas City, Chicago, Gary. And then when I moved here, I'm back where it's more not as diverse as it was. I've always felt very comfortable around everybody. I get along with everybody, and I just enjoy people. It's just, that's who I am. I'm a former nurse. I do financial work now, and I like to help everybody. I am not really involved in anything right now where I can really, I think, help as much as I would like to. So I was kind of thinking about getting more into politics a little bit to see if I could have any impact there. My kids are all out of school, so I'm really not affected with the school system at this point. But this has been a wonderful experience being around like-minded people like we all are. I feel very good about our discussions that we've had, and I would like to continue in any groups that I might be able to participate in where I could be of help. I also just think that the fact that we're all talking about this, the collective, I really believe that we all, if we think all together, that maybe we can make some good out of this. And I'm going to continue to read and learn more, but I would like to be more involved. And so if you have any suggestions that I could do, anybody has an opening for somebody to be involved, I'd be very happy to do that.
Thank you. Erin?
So I loved this book. For me, my background, I've always had an interest in bullying intervention. We've disliked segregation stuff. We've disliked racism. But on the other hand, as I read this book, what it tells me is like I have so many messages that I wasn't aware of, that we were perpetuating the racism because of those messages. And I don't like to be, so my incentive is that I don't like to be surprised by things I didn't know. But what I really appreciated about the book was that it made so much sense, and it put such a context for me in terms of like all kind of racism and where it comes from, in ways that I am like, dynamics that I've had in the past have been impacted by the caste system. And so for me, I want to be a safe ally. And so books like this help me to be that. I have a lot of like my daughters, I want them to be that way. And so I'm motivated in terms of, for me, with my cultural messages I had growing up, it's always been to, you know, don't stir the pot, be a perfectionist, and don't offend people. But on the other hand, like if I'm going to make changes, I need to stand up and I need to set boundaries. So that's one of the things that I am working on personally when I have family members or people in public spaces that make jokes or make inappropriate statements or engage in racism. I'm going to work more on standing up and whatever that looks like with my anxiety about stirring the pot. So I'm hoping that I can improve that. And then of course, with voting and politics, I try to vote in ways to make things more inclusive because I really value inclusivity and I want to make sure that I'm a good, valuable part of that.
Greg? Greg?
Yeah. Oh, it was a nice book. You know, what's noteworthy is that the majority of the participants are women. You know, I think that needs to go to be said, which means that we still have a lot of work to do in relationship to getting everyone involved in understanding this important work. And I appreciate any effort that people are making to be more sensitive to the issues that are impacting African Americans each and every day.
Okay, thank you. Jan?
I've been thinking about Greg's question since he asked it last week. And I think that the white caste, I think, is so invested in fear in this country that I would like to explore how we address that. I think that fear is so powerful. Just looking at what's happened recently, where the southern states are doing everything they can to suppress voters. And of course, the vote that they're trying to suppress is the Black vote. And they're getting away with it. I don't know. I guess I'm not as optimistic as some of the other people here. I enjoyed the book and I have really enjoyed the discussions very much.
Thank you. Julie?
Okay, I had to unmute there. I've been sitting here listening to everybody, and what I was thinking about saying just poof, completely fell out of my head because I've been listening to what everybody else has been saying here. But I think one of the things, you know, what Greg said about this being a majority women group is something that is interesting to note. The book Hood Feminism, which if anybody here has read or has not read, is a wonderful book that just brings that intersection of feminism and race. And I learned a lot from reading that book too. And it talks about how the feminist movement has left Black women behind, and brown women and Asian women. And when I read Caste, that it kind of, those two books kind of work together in my brain as kind of a gestalt of I don't know how to put it, but it just put the two notions together. And I think one of the things that I have often thought, and one of the things that I want to continue to do, is I think we need another word. And Caste kind of brought that out when dealing with people who were born into this caste system and are at the higher castes, who are reflecting their heritage and their traditions, and don't realize that what they are saying and doing is racist, and when you point it out to them, are horrified and think, oh my God, you're right, I never thought about it that way, and then try to change what, the way they're thinking and the way they're behaving. And I think there needs to be another word for that, for that aspect, that, when we talk about, is somebody racist, is a behavior racist, and something that, not to take away the level of discomfort or the pain, not to make it easier for white people, but to, if you're incapable of hearing it, then you are incapable of internalizing it. And so Caste really kind of helped make me think more about what is that word, and what is the importance of that word, and how do we get to that word and get that word out that says everything about racism, but in the perspective of this book. And I know I'm babbling right now, because as I said, I was thinking so much about what everybody else was saying that what I was planning on saying just totally and completely fell out of my head. So I will stop babbling now and let Tina give it over to the next person.
Could I say something, Julie?
Sure.
I think Kendi's book on how to be an anti-racist gives
Mhm.
you a way to talk about that. And,
Does it give us that word that?
well, it gives a way of understanding racism, and I'll send out something to the group about that. So
Yeah,
just
I
to
haven't
follow
read
up on
that one yet. I haven't read that one yet. It's on my list.
So I'll
Yeah,
send that
thanks.
out to everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
George.
Mhm.
Okay, Merrick?
Great, thanks. So the thing that's been most helpful in reading this book, I think for me, was really the framing of the caste system was really an exciting way, and kind of a game-changing way for me to look at the way our society has been set up. Thinking more about Greg's question, and I guess one thing quickly before that, I think about Pon's comment of demographics, and think about how Jared had joined us for the first meeting, and what reasons there could potentially have been for him to not show up to any other meetings. As in, like, was it timing, or was it the framework of these meetings? So that makes me really hungry to think about how we do a better job of including folks. And I think the incentive for people to change is understanding that the world that I want to build towards cannot be done through just operating through like a moral philanthropy. That these changes don't need to happen because it might be morally the right thing to do, because it is, but because the world that we need to build can only happen if we stop breaking down. A lot of folks are talking about books that they've read, and right now I'm reading The Sum of Us, which is about how racism affects all of us. Looks at things from public goods and how often racial dog whistles have been used to take from everyone. So it just makes me hungry to continue tearing down these racist systems that we have set up in our society, and build towards a more inclusive space.
Thank you. Marianne?
I found this book, along with the White Fragility book, very mind-opening. I was particularly struck by this author's presentation of the reckoning in Germany about the Holocaust, and realizing that we haven't had that kind of reckoning in the United States, although there is a possibility that we are having it now. And I'm looking at some of the things that are happening now in a different way. One of the things that interested me was hearing about the reparations that are being attempted in Evanston, Illinois, and there are difficulties, and there will be backlash, and there will be struggles. But this is an interesting time, and I think I am viewing it differently than I might have if I had not read this book particularly.
Okay, thank you. Pat?
Got to unmute. All great comment. I think for me, this book brought out things I already knew, but to an extent that it crystallized it. I mean, it really kind of hit home in a way that put together our whole history and brought us up to where we are today. And it all made sense based on what we, as a country, how we've treated other people in the caste system. I love how she did that and how she related it to other countries too. So you could kind of take a different aspect or step outside of your own country for a little bit and see what others were doing and how they were coping with it. In terms of what I want to do personally, I think I'm always trying to be that radical empathy and just hear people and try to understand what it's like for them. And I want to continue to do that. But I think as a nation, in order to get to that democracy that we all really think that we have, and it's not quite there, I think we have to be forever vigilant, and we always have to be on top of it, and we always have to be fighting for it. It's nothing that's going to come free to us. For me, what motivates me is people coming together. I love to see people coming together. That's a big motivation for me. And the future is a motivation for me, for my grandchildren, because I would love to see them also be able to play in a world that's diverse, where people, where, as Isabel says, where all those people have the potential to do what they've brought to this earth to do, to have their talents and to be here and to exist in a society that doesn't judge them. So I want to struggle more for that. And I understand, I think it was Jan's comment, that she's maybe not so optimistic. I think I'm on this border of being really optimistic, because I think we have a moment here in history that we could challenge and jump on and make a huge difference going forward, or it could be the scariest moment in our country and we could bring ourselves back to the brink of civil war. And I don't want to see that. I want to see the moment where we have something that we can do to bring everybody together. Gosh, what is that? I've told you, I think once before, I've had this crazy idea and I think I'm going to go after it now, but I really do believe that a lot of people don't have the opportunity, or don't maybe want the opportunity, or haven't tried to come together with people who look different than them, who may be in a different class than them, to get to know one another. It comes back to that story of Isabel with the plumber. And one of the things I always thought, why could we have to report for jury duty. During the Roosevelt administration, he started like CCC camps where young people were able to all go out across the country and build things and do it together. I think there needs to be something national that brings us together to solve some of our past and social issues. How we do that, I don't know. Is it like jury duty, but you have to go to a study circle to get to know somebody, just to start bringing people together, but make it part of citizenship. Because if we keep looking at each other as the thems, we're not finding the us. We've got to find the us. And I think people in some ways we might have to have a system that brings that together and makes that happen.
Okay, thank you, Pat.
Nice, thank you.
And Paula?
Well, I learned that I really need to have conversations with my grandchildren, who I don't, because African American history is not really taught in the schools, and they don't really have an awareness of the African American history. So I really learned a lot that I didn't know. It's very difficult to read some sections of this book in learning of the torture and the degradation that the people that studied suffered. So I currently am participating in several different groups, and I know that Connie Whitmer said that she doesn't know what she could do. She's been participating in a multicultural group, you know, for the last, I don't know how many years. So I think that even those kinds of groups that are not public groups, and I think to gather with people of different cultures is very enlightening, and so I think she is doing something. But what incentive do I have? The incentive is that I want to be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. Excuse me. Ooh. So that's,
Okay. I'm sorry.
no, that's it. I mean,
Okay. Okay, Sherry?
Can you see who's talking? I didn't see her at all.
oh, here I am. I'm sorry. I'm sitting
Oh,
back.
yeah, I just want to know, I want to know faces, so I might see you once.
Okay, and another group, for those that don't say that they are aware of anything that they could possibly do, there's another group that meets in Valparaiso, and it's Dining for Women. And that,
Now, Paula,
pardon me?
it's a different name now.
Oh, right, they just changed the name. Okay, well, what is it?
Together, Women Rise.
Okay, Together Women Rise. So that group, even though I haven't been, because they meet on a day when I have another commitment, but they meet in Valparaiso, and
Wednesdays, yeah.
yes.
I
So,
go, good.
yes, so I don't know, I don't know if Sue, we can put something, or we can send to George what the details of that group is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you send that to me, I'll put it in the email.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Sherry?
Thanks. Well, even without reading this book, I'm very aware that I'm not doing enough, whatever little bit it is. And again, I think that my place is to speak with other white friends, family. And I find that when I bring up this book, I'm talking with my white friends who are of similar mind. And that's really easy, but that's not really where I need to maybe plant the seed of some other way of thinking for them, for us. I just finished, or I'm finishing the book, How the Purpose by Alicia Garza, who was one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. And she stresses in there, you know, the importance of it being a multiracial movement, group, organization. But again, I think for me, for my small input in it, it has to be within the white community, and just getting people to have other ways of thinking, to not spout out cliches that they either do or don't believe in. And as far as incentive, it's just, and I think George read this at the beginning, you know, to choose not to be dominant, even if I'm supposedly of this dominant caste. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. And then Tim?
Okay, I'll try and I have some notes here. I'll try and say things that maybe haven't already been said over and over. Everything that's been said is great tonight. I guess I really like this book because of the parallel Germany, India, and the US, you know, kind of looking at these three countries together and how they had somewhat similar experiences around this idea of caste. And also within the US, it just seems like there's so much more education and understanding we could have about race and slavery, but also indigenous peoples and their experience and what they went through. One of the things that's struggling with is the polarization in our country and how feel I'm along with, you know, a Bernie Sanders sort of philosophy of government and progressivism and all that. And I have two millennial kids who are very much in the same wavelength. And so we have this polarization where right now in our country, legislation can't really happen, you know, bipartisan because of the split. And that maybe up to as much as 50% of our country seems to have this nationalistic sort of bent right now. And how can we get across lines, communicating together again and having some influence on disinformation that's prevalent. I'm a retired librarian, so my whole career, the idea is we shouldn't have censorship, yet we have this rampant disinformation that people are using for news sources and believing. How to wrestle with that. Self-interest was mentioned. It seems from the data that inequality has definitely been growing in our country and around the world. And self-interest says that even if you don't want to get involved or whatever, your self-interest is at stake because inequality grows and grows, and there's going to be more violence, there's going to be more loss of wealth, the splitting apart of our country and around the world. The book was using this idea of caste, which is really wonderful. At one point, I wondered if anyone has written anything about comparing religions around the world in terms of who's on top and using religion as a way to be predominant in your religion against other religions. So, you know, Christianity, those of us who are Christian, have we looked closely enough at what has been done in the name of Christianity over the years? The evangelical churches seem to be very much presently more on the right wing side or conservative viewpoints on these issues, but yet there are mainline denominations like Episcopalians and ELCA and some of those that I think are really doing some good work about trying to wrestle and come up with social policy statements and things like that, where congregants can, you know, learn as we are doing with this study group. I also like the White Fragility book, parallel to the Caste book, because the idea about microaggressions and how progressive people who think they aren't part of the problem really are still part of the system. And there are all these things that we do every day that contribute to the problem. And that whites need to take responsibility for issues around race. So I think that's main. Oh, one last thing would be living in Northwest Indiana for a lot of years and working in Lake County. There's this idea that how can you measure the quality of health of an area or a country or whatever. In Northwest Indiana, one of the ways to measure that is to look at our urban core cities and see how they're doing. How are the least among us doing? And then that kind of says, how is the quality of life for everyone together working out. So I think we have, you know, the region, Northwest Indiana and our urban core, Gary, Chicago, Portage, Michigan City, Hammond, those towns where we can be involved in trying to make a difference or working together with leaders in those communities. So those are some of the things that I had sort of thought about as we were going through this book.
Thank you, Tim. Sue?
Know what else to say, but I want to ask, I have a couple of observations. The same paragraph that George read, that's what I underlined so much that I wanted to bring up to the discussion. All the participants participating here already not behaving like the way they were born in their position. They're already changing. And AAW, I belong to AAW. Somebody asked a question the other day. Did you ever feel that like you were not dominant? I mean, do you remember, Marianne, that question that was asked? Anne asked me, did you ever feel inferior? So I told that day, spontaneously, I told that day, no, I did not feel inferior in this town because this is a small town. I'm known as a doctor's wife. So that's why I was not affected by that way. And then I've been thinking about it ever since then. But I have not been anywhere without, I have not worked, I have not experienced. Would I have experienced same thing? How would I have experienced if I didn't have doctor's wife, that title, and would I be another brown person? I don't know. So these are the questions that we're pondering. And then what I want to, I had a conversation with one group person here. He really made me even think more. So the changes that need to be made is among all of us, and also at the school level and the city level. And I want to go and have a conversation with at the school level. That's where they need to be taught from elementary school age onwards, all of the things we are talking about. So then they won't need to have this conversation when we are older. When they're older. It becomes a part of their psyche. It becomes a part of, that's how they will live. They won't see color, because I substituted in elementary schools and I went to middle school. I never went to high school. But until 4th grade, they didn't see that I was different or anything, nothing. They were just excited, curious, fun. I saw the change in 5th grade, and 6, 7, 8 is already too late. So the changes need to be made at the elementary school level, and the teachers need to really incorporate in their school and the day-to-day teaching. It should be part of, it's not something that they have to make extra effort to talk.
Thank you, Sue. Jarrett?
Hello?
Hello.
I haven't finished Caste yet, but because I've been but I just wanted to join the discussion and to hear your guys' perspective more from it. But I'm gonna start reading more of it.
Okay. Nor, I see you're there, and I know you haven't been a part of the group. Was there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I missed the last 2 discussions, or maybe the first one, but I have been following along with most of the book, and I think it was, I don't remember who said this before. I think they might have left the meeting, and I don't recall their name, But one thing I found interesting is how Isabel kind of showed caste's connotations in ways that are surprising. Because when I started the book, I didn't really think of caste in a way that applies to America and the history of African Americans.
You're breaking up
For
pretty
me,
bad.
I always thought of it in the
Not hearing her.
way it relates to places like India and the caste system there. So I think it was a more like social class way to look at it, which I hadn't done before. So that's something I found surprising, the way they lit it to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
George, we
Can
have
you hear me now?
covered,
Can anyone hear me now?
yes.
Is it okay?
Okay, are you finished or are you still talking? Okay, George, I think we have finished everybody. There are some questions in the chat you might want to address.
Okay, what are they?
Okay, let me move back up.
Tina, you
Yes.
didn't.
I was trying to get away with that. Okay. What I took away from the book, I like her analogy. I like how she looks at India's caste system and brings that caste system to America, because I never ever thought about African Americans being a caste system. And just reading that book made me realize that we are a caste system. And just different things that she pointed out, you know, it's like she explained history very well. And I looked at that like, wow, is that how the dominant caste thinks of lower class people? It actually made me sick to my stomach reading the book. It really did. And it made me think about what's embedded in the white heart that we can't see on the outside of the white heart. And I like the way she calls it the dominant caste. She doesn't say white people. She doesn't say Caucasian people. She doesn't say African Americans. She says dominant caste and inferior caste. Even when talking about President Trump, she never names his name. She calls him something else. I can't recall that. But then it made me think about parents, parents of the dominant caste. How do we get rid of this caste system? I think it starts at home. I think it starts with parents. Parents, they have to teach their children there is no inferior caste. We're all created equal in the eyes of God. When I read about the divine will in the 8 pillars, it made me mad that we call that a divine will. It wasn't God that said to Ham, Canaan is cursed. It was Noah that said that. Okay, so why is that a divine will from God? That's not from God. That was from Noah, Noah's son Ham. He's the one that cursed his own son. So all of that just brings an awareness that the caste system is created by man. It's not created by God. And whatever is created by man, we can undo it. It's not the divine will of God for us to have an inferior race of people. So that's what I got from the book.
Good for you, Tina. I'm right with you. God, we are all God's children. If we realize that, there won't be any caste.
Right. Right.
You know,
Parents
one
have
of the
to teach their
questions,
children
and
there is no caste.
you know, we did pretty well. We got through everybody, and it's 7:06. We have a few minutes if people want to stick around. And I want Tina to read the questions and see if we can do that. I've made notes of what everybody said. I'm going to write up some of the ideas that people had. And I told a couple of people that I'd send some things out. So I'll do a follow-up email, sending out some articles and some things that people asked for. Why don't we go through the rest of the questions, Tina?
Okay, so there's a first question by Greg. He says, are women afraid of their power if women do not have an incentive to change? If women do not have an incentive to change will not occur.
Right.
Okay. So do you want me to just read them or are we going to comment on those, George?
Well, it seems to me that that's a question for women. So is there somebody who'd like to respond?
Respond. So for me, and I also like the other question about being willing to give up our, I think you said like our place in the cast. And I mean, it's a hard thing to think about, but I think yes. And it's terrifying to think of that, but yes. But on the other hand, for me, it's this idea of how to create a safer community. I'm not, I guess, I don't know if I'm afraid of my power. I just don't think I'm fully embracing it yet, if that makes sense. In the sense of like, I'm really working on coming up with responses in the moment. I'm not as quick-witted when it comes to immediate responses. My sister is actually really good with that. So for me, I have to pause people so that I can then come up with a response. And so for me, getting into my power would be being able to speak up against the anxiety and the significant, significant pushback that I will get and have gotten, and just have to be okay with it and know that if people are pissed at me, then I'm doing the right thing. So it's a good thing when people get pissed.
Dr. Martin Luther King wrote a book called Why We Can't Wait. He talked about moderate liberal white folks and moderate Negroes who wanted to wait a lifetime to make change.
Right.
And so his response was, you don't have that time based on the injustices that's taking place. No, now I'm not just speaking to white women. White women ought to realize their own power. The issue is, I'm full of dealing with conversations with academics, Adam, who can analyze the problem ad infinitum, but never do anything, never make any kind of change at all, but can quote me 50 different books about why the change needs to occur, but never move out of their particular caste. That's the reason why I asked the question.
Yeah.
So what's the incentive for you not to do what you're doing in order to make change?
Am I assuming from this that they assume women have more power than men? When they talk about woman power?
Women have as much power as they want.
Everybody does.
Nope. White women, let me be specific. White women have as much power as you want. You decide whether or not you're going to participate in the cast or not. When you decide not to be in the cast, you can move out of it. You have fluidity in this society, and you know this. But you know that if you move out of that cast, that you're gonna draw some attention to yourselves and probably some resistance. But there's no doubt in my mind that if women in this society decide to make change, they can.
Greg,
They just did it. They just did it in the last election.
Greg, you're absolutely right. And there's a historical background to what you're saying. Women were against themselves getting the vote because they felt that they were going to give up something that they had. And it took very, very strong women to get women the vote very late in the United States compared to elsewhere. But women had the power to do that, but there was that fear of giving up the power that they had. You know, the other thing, we can go back to the ancient Greeks. We can look at the play, The Trojan Women, where the women decided to withhold their favors from the warriors in Greece until they stopped fighting. So there is a historical background to what you're saying, that women really do have power, but we're afraid to use it.
There's a lady by the name of Mary Daly, who is a feminist theologian, who talks about political lesbianism, the fact that women have the power to withdraw themselves from society, from male society, and reset and redefine what the relationship ought to be based on equity and justice. Yep. And what evidence this, in terms of my perspective, is the amount of people who are here and who is here.
I would say too, I think
so I can do a head count and show you how many people are concerned about this issue and whether or not they're male or female.
I think the book does a really good job. She talks about dominant group status threat. And I liked that concept because it made it so clear as to why things are so hard and the anxiety about it. And so it was able to kind of jar something loose in terms of my own reactions, and I was able to have that kind of increased awareness of it. My concern is I want to like, so I'm reading the books, and I know like what you said about the academics piece, but I'm kind of in this place where I want to read it so that I don't put people of color in the position to have to tell me. But on the other hand, like I also want to be a safe person that people can tell me if I am being racist. I know we talked before about this idea of, you know, wanting to like a word that that we can hear better than racism. But honestly, if I'm racist, I just want to know. But I also hope that I can read as much as I can so that I avoid that. That's but I guess with what you're saying about, you're right, we can't wait. And the dominant group status threat part was really, it stood out in terms of why my reactions have been what they have in the past. And so the more awareness I have, the easier it's going to be for me to hopefully not do stupid things when I'm in public.
You're not alone. The moderate Negro is the same thing, does the same thing. The moderate international person, the moderate Hispanic, Latina X person does the same thing, assuming that, you know, white people are going to get beneficent and be philanthropic in terms of making change without doing anything themselves. So it's not just white women. White women can give leadership though to the change because they have always been part of change in history. Women, not just white women, with women, because we don't want to forget Ida B. Wells, and we don't want to forget, you know, Sojourner Truth and some of the other people that are there. But you could lead the change, and you could help people, and you have led the change, and you continue to lead the change by evidence of what's here. You know, so it's no surprise to me that Noah is in leadership, because if it wasn't Noah and Jared, the youth, and it being male and female, it would be hard pressed. We'd be hard pressed to have anything to do at the high school.
Great.
Okay.
Other questions, Tina?
Yeah, there's a couple more. This is from Anne Marie. I find that even white friends I think of as liberals are resistant to taking on white privilege. The way they deal with safety during COVID is especially expressive of white privilege they do not see. And that's from Anne Marie.
Does that make sense? Does everybody understand what I'm referring to there?
No.
Oh, so I feel like Black and brown people are bearing the brunt of the deaths from COVID, and white people are going out, you know, to the bars. And it just really upsets me. And I have most of my friends get it, but I do have friends that don't. And I just have not been able to get through to them. I have not been able to get through to them. And I take that on myself. You know, I keep trying to find a way. But I also feel that that women are more about coming together and talking and, you know, sorting things out. I mean, it's just what we do. I do know men who are also concerned about these issues. So I just wanted to say that for men, they just maybe might not show up, in a forum like this. And as far as changing my case, I can't change my case, but I can speak to people. I mean, I'm white. I grew up the way I grew up. There's nothing I can do to change that, but I can talk to people. I can not be afraid to speak out, and I do that. So that's where I see my role, and I see that, you know, other white women can do that. You know.
Oh, you could break your caste. You don't just say what the truth is. You don't want to break it.
I don't know what you mean by breaking my caste. How do I change? I can't change my skin color. I can't change my upbringing.
Oh yeah, you can do all that if you have the power to do that. That's the great thing about living in America. You can do those kinds of things if you so choose, but it's gonna cost you. And the question is, do you want to pay the cost?
I don't agree with that. I can't.
I know you don't.
I can't change who I am. I can speak up against other people that I don't agree with how they're dealing with things, but I can't change that. I don't know what you mean by that.
Well,
honestly.
what Isabel Wilkerson says is that you can choose not to dominate.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
you know, I understand what you're saying. I have a friend who represents a bunch of fairly rich folks, and she asked them all if they thought their white skin had helped them get to where they are. And to a person, they said no.
Right.
And that's just, you know, that's insane.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they live in this world, but they don't have their eyes open. And, you know, we can each reject the privilege that we have as best we can. One thing I wanted to say in terms of the, you know, it makes me mad too when I see, you know, people not following the guidelines. And, you know, we would be back in schools long ago if we didn't have this culture of, you know, individual, you know, everybody wants individual liberties, but what happened to the common good?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have given up the common good for individual liberties. So I have a right not to wear a mask by Gump or whatever. And it doesn't matter who that hurts. And, you know, our society is somewhat unique in that way. And it's one of the things that maintains the caste system is this individual rights over the common good. And that's something I think we might want to think about.
Can I ask you all a question really fast? So, I'm sure you've heard of the saying, white silence is violence. I know that got really, you know, famous over the summer with the BLM protests. And obviously being proactive about your race consciousness and also class consciousness is a really good thing. But how can you break out of your caste as the white person if you benefit from structural ideas that help you, if that makes sense? So like financial policies or policies in America that pander to white neighborhoods rather than black neighborhoods. Like, how can your activism break you out of those benefits that, you know, put you in that caste in the first place? I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, one of the things I wanted to bring up here, and it's grist for a next discussion if people like, is that I don't think this country is going to come anywhere close to equity if we don't take seriously the question of reparations. And, you know, it's something you can talk about personally. It's something we could talk about nationally, and it's something we could talk about in our own city. And until we acknowledge the harm done and analyze what that harm has done to individuals throughout our society and make that right. And that's something that means, I mean, it may mean money payments and it may mean some other things, but it's certainly going to cost us. And, you know, Greg's question is, what's the incentive for us to do that? And if we don't raise these issues and bring this to the fore, we're kind of whistling at Dixie if we're not willing to say, okay, we need the fact that white people own homes at a huge percentage more than African Americans. that was done by government policy. It wasn't just done by bad realtors redlining. That redlining was a government policy about who they were going to fund, who the FHA was going to fund. And so the wealth gap is something that was created in our nation, and it was also incentivized by individual realtors and whatnot. The realtors in this town, every one of them refused to sell a home to the first Black family that was moving here. They were asked specifically in 1968, 4 years after the Civil Rights Act was passed. They bear some responsibility. The town council here required the building of a $3,000 boulevard in front of a house on a dirt road in order to allow it to be built for a Black family here. And so these kinds of things happen not just in our town, but all over the nation. And if we're not willing to talk seriously about reparations and about making it right, I mean, when we injure somebody, it's not all handled by insurance, you know. If you break somebody's leg, you have to do something about it. There's some indigenous cultures in Mexico that if you murder somebody, your penalty is you have to support their family for the rest of their lives. That's a different kind of
Reparation.
Yeah, reparation. So that's a conversation that if people are interested in, I think would be important to have. It's not an easy one, but it's one that requires education. And I think after reading this book, people might be a little more ready to have that. I don't know if there's, we're getting close to our closing time. Is there anybody who has some last
George,
comments?
there are other questions in the chat, and we'll just do one more because it is 7:25. And then Tony talks about a book called Waking Up White. So Tony, do you want to discuss that as a book that you've read?
Not me.
Tony McDonald.
Yeah, it was an impactful book for me. I actually read it when I was in Alabama, coming back from I believe it's the Racial Equity Museum, and then coming back from Mobile. It has great historical perspective. It's written by a Caucasian woman who takes a really aggressive approach to change and waking herself up and coming to terms with her own white privilege. She also spawned from that book and her work what's called the 21-Day Equity Challenge, which I've always wanted to do. And I've always wanted to focus the challenge around the LGBTQ community, which is something that I struggle with in terms of my own bias and in terms of my own growth and learning. So I was just talking with Aaron about it. It's up there, take a look at it. I've always wanted to do it. I've never started it. I learned about it a couple of years ago and have just kept putting it off. But, when you talk about making change and progressive, aggressive change, she has a good tool and resource to do that and push for it. So.
I think there's a church reading that book here. I heard this same book from a dining for women group. They're reading this book.
And if you've never heard her speak, she is just like the book. She takes a very aggressive approach. Turns a lot of people off, but it's a wake-up call.
Great.
The name of that book?
We'll put the link of that in the email too. I think the name of the book was Waking Up White. Other comments for the good and welfare of the group?
Just very grateful to have been a part of it. Thank you.
I think
We'll keep in touch.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, we're not going to be the same after reading this book, because we definitely we all have to think differently.
Yes.
We are already thinking differently.
Are you all thinking about doing similar sort of group study of The Sum of Us? It sounds like a really interesting book also.
Which
What,
one?
what book is that?
The Sum of Us.
Some of us, yeah.
I just heard about that the other day.
Yeah, The Sum of Us by Heather McKee.
Yeah.
I'd be interested.
Well, why don't we put together some ideas and send it out to the group and.
Not at this hour. This is a bad hour for me.
Has any, George, have you attended that White Fragility author interview, Purdue University?
I've heard her several times. I didn't hear the one you told me about. No.
Yeah, it was very good.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the video called, Mrs. Knockenbody?
Which one?
The video from White Fragility, what you were referring to.
The Purdue University, Purdue University speakers forum. They had this author interview. They interviewed her. I can send you the link to George. Maybe he can forward that.
Yeah, Sue, if you send me the link, I'll put that in the email.
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate that. Thank you.
She sounded like exactly like a book, her book. Even more powerful.
Good. And if anybody has any other ideas they want to send out, just send it to me. And I'll put this email together in a couple of days. And then we'll talk about if people want to follow up with something else. All right.
Hi.
Thank you, George.
Thank you for
Thank
this.
Thank you.
Bye,
Tony,
everybody.
Thank you,
Tina,
everybody.
Pat, we'll get together on this. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
See you all Saturday.
Thank
Okay.
Tina,
Yep.
Tony, and Body.
And God bless.
Yes.
Tina, I'm having trouble. I followed the link, but I'm still having trouble. Can we? I know that y'all are going to debrief. So can